nowadays people management is the norm. Chances are, if you are working for yourself, you probably have to manage some resources or your own workers. If you're working at a company, that becomes more traditional in terms of people management structures. Even if you're not a de facto people manager, you will have people within your purview and your line of sight, where you will need to be making strategic management people-based decisions. So no matter who you are and no matter where you are in terms of your career, you're going to be affected by people management, by being a manager, or as many of us are, being managed by other people. Okay. So what I hope to talk to you about today, just a little snippet of what could be a it could be a discussion for the ages, is how do we adjust to the need for effective people management now, particularly when we have this lens around DEI and making our workspaces more reflective of our population here in America and having equitable practice. People remember managers, not organizations. From my own anecdotal experience working in HR and just in general, there are a lot of Gallup polls, US Department of Labor. There have been many studies on workforce and what makes a good workforce, what makes people happy at work. And without fail, one of the top reasons why we see a lot of attrition and discontent in our organizations are bad management practices. People rarely remember the organizations or what they're doing or the projects they worked on. Some they will, some they won't. For the most part, people are like, how was I treated? What was my environment like? And that has become a determining factor in people management success or failure. So about 1 in 15 workers are going to manage people on a daily basis. So these aren't even people in de facto manager roles. That more comes to your ratio of around 1 to 6 or 1 to 7, depending on organizational depth and capacity. But people are going to be interacting with people and, more importantly, giving them direction and creating the culture in which they work. Okay. Managers are going to account for 70% of workforce engagement. Right? When we're talking about ways to get our employees involved in meaningful work or have business outputs and really be innovative and push for those ideas, a lot of that structure comes from managers supporting those movements, clearing paths for those movements, and ultimately become a huge deciding factor in people's feelings about how they work. Okay. According to this is back in 2018, a Mercer poll basically said that about 1/3 of employees at any given time plan to exit their organization within the next year. So this attrition has become really regular in terms of opportunity. We're not seeing people staying at places for years and years and years. Some people will call that generational, right? The rest of us down here will basically say our working conditions have changed and they no longer address our needs. So, our typical okay boomer of, oh, you young kids don't want to stay around here anymore, or the workplace, they're hiring all these young whippersnappers with 3 years of experience so they don't pay me. Yes, that is how capitalism works. We'll get into like the underscore of that, but it's also meaning that every business is dealing with this insane level of attrition, and how can we get people to stay? Okay. And then what does all this mean if our people management focused on finding, keeping, and growing talent, right? What happens to all this when we layer over this other necessity of having inclusive, safe, people-oriented, equitable workplaces? This becomes compounded. So Daniel Pink is an author. He's a people management leader and author of several books. One of his most recent works is Drive. And in this, he says people have an inherent tendency to seek out novelty and change, to extend and exercise their capacities to explore and learn. What Daniel Pink is positing here is that engagement and work product comes down to needing to create cohesiveness between our natural innate desire for challenge and exploration and meaningfulness, right? This is what is coming from people when they look for work. Right? But here's some issues that confound this. Different people have different motivations, and this is clear, different strokes for different folks, right? You're going to have certain employees that are motivated by different things than others. And this ultimately will underscore their want, ability, and capacity to learn and explore and rise to new challenges. Okay? Those motivations are at odds with current professional environment. Even though we are saying that we thrive best in these exploratory, capacity expanding environments, that's 100% what we're not being met with, right? The motivations of most people are at odds with current professional environments. And I feel like I don't even have to explain that too much. If you've worked a job, then you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? And so satisfaction with work, our key word for this entire little talk and the rest of the 15 minutes in which I will be talking to you is engagement, okay? That's going to be the difference between having a workforce that is constantly turning over, that's in attrition, that doesn't meet the needs of its varied population in an inclusive, culture binding, equitable way. It all comes down to how are we engaging our employees, i.e., are we connecting to their intrinsic motivations? So this is a nice little graph that I borrowed. There's this company here based in Austin called Ability, and they do professional leadership development using simulation-based trainings. I used to work there, so that's why I have this nifty graph. But here, this is coming from some surveys done by Gallup, Towers Perrin, and it's basically showing that at any given time, this is the pool of your employees. 30% of them are engaged, right? These are people who are actively putting forth discretionary effort. They're customer forward, they're driven, they're really driving your business forward. Okay? About 50%, we're talking about half of an organization, a substantial amount, are literally just there collecting their paycheck. They're like, I go in, I do my simple work, I leave, I've made my check, I'm done. This is your consummate DMV worker, right? I'm stamping in, I'm stamping out. No shade to the DMV. I'm sure there are people who derive much pleasure from working at the DMV. However, you know, our stereotype of that bureaucratic government worker, I'm checking in, I'm checking out. And then we have 20% of people who are actually undermining your efforts. What they are contributing to the business is chaos, right? They don't like it there. They're disgruntled. They're discouraged workers, right? You have people who are not only just kind of treading water, but they are in fact rolling back any improvement that you could have. So if we're looking at 70% essentially of our workforce is not engaged in pushing our directive forward, what changes that? So again, Daniel Pink posits that our motivations basically fall into these particular buckets, right? Status, possession, companionship, purpose, autonomy, security, achievement, recognition. Some of these things are pretty easy to understand, right? If I'm a person who views having status as being important, wielding some influence or power, right? I will look for work that allows me to do that. If I'm a person who really likes people, right? My work can't be siloed. I can't be working by myself in a cubicle every day. I need to be on team-related relational projects, right? My drive is companionship, right? Security, and I would argue that though we may be quick to view security as monetary security, I would argue that that's probably very low on the list. Security comes more from having this secure in your work that you will have this role, right? That there is something there that will always be there for you to do and drive your practice, right? Side note, if we look at sort of what keeps people at organizations, it's never money, just in case anyone is wondering. It's literally never money. So in looking at motivations, and this is me kind of posing a rhetorical question out to people, if we were to be interactive, I would essentially ask you to meditate on a while about which one of these things drive you to be your best self at work. Okay, I want you to think about that. As like, yeah, I'm gonna say, Stephanie, furrow your brow for a second. Think about which one of those, Shlomi, think about which one of those really drives you, wakes you up in the morning, which of these are important to you, okay? And now that you have a picture of that, ask yourself, does your current work environment engage these motivations that you have? I hope the answer is yes. I hope your work finds you at this place. However, for many people, because we are working in structures that are not in line with what we need as far as motivation. Understandably, because business is business. However, you'll find that most people are working in working environments where they're overwhelmingly carrot stick based, right? You're either getting a carrot or a stick, right? If you're not doing something, there is some type of punitive response. If you are doing something, and when I say doing something, typically in our Judeo-Christian society, it looks like overwork, lack of rest, unnecessary production, just for the show of capitalism, right? We're all doing it for show, we're on a stage. That in and of itself, like that is the reward. And so then that has to loop back in, well, what are we rewarding as behavior? And so for most people, right, the reward that they are getting is not in line with what motivates them. Okay. And more importantly, as a manager, it now becomes your responsibility, I would say, as a person who is in charge of not just getting things done, but truly growing and developing people for your company, building their skills so that those skills can then build and help others and others and others, and creating this feedback loop of great people staying at your company, right? It's your imperative as a manager. And so the question becomes, are managers engaging people and meeting their motivations? I'll use myself as an example. My main motivator in my work is autonomy, hands down. If someone tried to micromanage me or wanted me to check in, or like needed to meet with me every day to see what I was doing, or was standing over my shoulder to make sure I was working exactly 7 hours a day, I would quit after a week. I'm like, the work got done. Don't worry about how it got done. It got there. So for me, no matter if this job pays $1 billion, right? If people are like, oh, your work is great, and they give me tons of rewards, and the work is fulfilling. I used to be a teacher, for Christ's sake. I love some rewarding, low-paying work. That is my bread and butter. Okay, I love being a poor do-gooder. It's my fave. I would still quit. I'd be like, no, because I can't do that. But that's what people think management is. Some managers, because of a lack of understanding around what motivates their employees, they oftentimes think that management is the same as observation, right? That management is the same thing as having work product materialize, right? That management is the same thing as clocking in and clocking out and making sure people are there on time, right? That's, for some people, that is what management is. It is also for some people a wielding of power in this weird egotistical way. And so then it becomes like, in what ways can I exercise control, right? Not how can I allow the people I work with to find their own paths or flourish or come into innovation. Right now, people are basically doing a lot of mimicking of current programs without a lot of success. And this is a little chart that basically shows you, right, the things that actually bring about diversity and change, and not your like 1 hour diversity anti-bias trainings. Because I promise you, your white coworkers are still going to be racist after this next hour. Okay, so like that doesn't matter. And again, I call them racist because white people think being racist means you're mean to black people, when it in fact means that you are complicit in institutionally systematic um, structures. So I know that's difficult because people think that's being mean to black people. It's not. But you can see here, these regular sort of engagement strategies are actually leading to increases in women, and particularly women minorities. When people do these, you actually see a decrease in white male leadership. Ah, we'll talk about that later. That's just a fun little graph that I was like, ooh, what's the T? So we can talk about that later. But here's some things that work, right? This is a little bonus. We're not going to get here. I talked way too much about my motivators. But if there's a round two, we'll talk more about this. And then the moral of my story is engagement, engagement, engagement. Okay. So long story short, engage your employees because they're all going to have different motivations. And then two, something you can do tomorrow in terms of reaching motivators is building rapport, right? And understanding that you carry explicit and implicit biases, implicit and explicit expectations. That if we made that a little bit clear, that's a way that we can get to employee motivations a lot quicker and increase engagement. I think it's really difficult. And I will say this, I've recently been engaged to do some DEI workshop work with one of these lovely universities that are actually up here. I won't say which one. And so we're kind of running into the same thing, right? Like there is this call to action, but the academy is calcified, right? We know that university systems themselves are built on the back of chattel slavery and have been getting that energy and that income and that hedge fund energy the whole time. So it's not surprising. What I will say is, I think the actions of those people are sound like that of animals backed into a corner, right? Like this is sort of a last vestige for what they know, and in justifying like, hey, I'm trying to get to like the empathy part of motivation, right? Which I'm like, are these people who are used to a system that has always benefited them? They've been told that they're doing good work, that they're shaping good minds, and now they're being confronted with the fact that their very work is detrimental, right? The very work to which they have dedicated themselves has caused more consternation for students who have come across, their hallowed annals than anything else. And I think that's really jarring. And so I do want to give a level of empathy for that, in the sense of I do understand, right? That being said, I think in your situation, and hopefully your consultant is, as an outside force, is able to kind of be this person and, make them work. Consultants are there to like push people in a different direction that maybe, people might not hear from us, but that outside force. So hopefully they're being doing that kind of aggressive push. So, you don't have to be the bad guy. But I think for your consulting partner, it is going to be reclaiming that time. And I think the biggest thing that doesn't feel right, particularly when we want to be people who are discursive and communal at the same time, and we want to invite different opinions, is that some people's opinions actually just don't have a space. Like I can't hold space for this. If we're talking about inclusion and how to bring our university literally in line with the population it serves, I don't have time for you talking about being mad how white people can't use the N word. You can.